Zillow, the leading real estate marketplace, has announced that it's going to be shutting down its iBuying unit, or Zillow Offers, and laying off 25% of its employees over the next few years. This is a story and an update that speaks just to how close and how intrinsically linked employer brand is to overall business strategy. In the announcement that it's going to be laying off 25% of its employees, the CEO has announced that it's going to be ensuring that all the workers that are going to be affected are going to have as smooth a transition as possible. And while it's easy to signal to the market that, yes, we're going to be doing that, many people are going to be looking at Zillow from an employer brand standpoint and seeing, did they deliver on that promise, and then making a judgment long-term over whether this is a company that is going to be safe to work for going forward. You've got to remember that the employment contract or the employment dynamic is driven by a few different things. One is the risk aversion. Most, if not the majority of employees are looking for places where they can build a career without the risk of layoffs. I think that's one of the things that people, at least at the management level, often forget when it comes to making business decisions. That the layoffs are hard. Layoffs are hard on everybody involved. They're actually incredibly difficult on the company as well. There's a survivorship dynamic that happens where, a layoff as small as 1% affects, a big swath of the population or the working force that stays at the company over the next year. So you start to see turnover tick up quite drastically as well. So there are a lot of dynamics at play here when we look at Zillow laying off a quarter of its employees after closing one business unit. Granted, that business unit was doing significant work. I mean, in the first half of 2021, Zillow Offers generated something like $1.5 billion in revenue. And I think one of the primary drivers of why it had to trigger these layoffs or this announcement of layoffs is that it's expecting big losses in Q4 as a result of some of the buying activities that happened, in prior quarters. Maybe a video or an episode for another day, but how do these algorithms actually price out homes and things? I think that's an interesting thing to look at, and that's obviously been proven ineffective here, at least in the short term, and it's triggered such a big shift in terms of the overall strategy of the company. And as a result, 25% of its employees are going to be affected. So kind of switching gears, we're going to look at that promise that the CEO has made to ensure that the transition is made as smooth as possible. Well, there are a few different ways that companies can do this, of course, and tactically, one of the great ways to do it is with outplacement. It's one of the often overlooked aspects of the severance agreement, or that severance process. A lot of time, companies, especially those with big balance sheets, will like to throw money at the problem. Here's a 6 months pay and go find yourself a new job kind of thing. But technology is one of those things that in times of high stress, like a layoff for most people, it's hard to be put onto technology and told to fend for yourself. And so outplacement is one of those programs or one of those services, especially when you can find a provider that does it with empathy and a human-focused approach, that is a great idea. It's a great idea when it comes to not only helping those that are affected in the short term or in the immediate term with finding a new role, when it comes to coaching and resume writing and things like that, just making sure that process is as smooth as possible. But it also helps with signaling to those employees that have survived the layoff, the 75% for Zillow in this case. And it says, we do care. We care more than just looking at our human capital structure as a number. We care about everybody as a human being. And in the case that, layoffs happen, we're going to be looking after everybody on a human level. And that includes making sure that we're setting everybody up such that even if they find a better role, that's almost the ideal outcome. And I think outplacement is one of those tactics or one of those services that really helps companies do this. So this is a big story, especially in the employer brand and human capital world. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the company executes its promise against making sure that the transition out of Zillow and into another role is as smooth as possible. But big news today on this front.